And welcome to another tutorials in Django. In this part, we're going to talk about how we can create a chart in Django. So the module that we're going to use is a JavaScript library using the chart.js, and we're going to see how we can create a chart out of data. So first of all, we're going to create our project and add our models to the database, and we're going to add some data to the database, and then what we're going to do is to create different kinds of graphs and show and render them on the HTML page. So the data that we're going to enter could be anything, but we're going to talk more about the details throughout the project. So first of all, let's create our project. So I'm gonna create a new, open up a new terminal inside of my VS Code, and so I'm gonna create a new directory and call this my chart. So the next thing I'm gonna do is to cd to my chart, and then I'm gonna create a virtual environment. So Python 3-m venv for virtual environment, and I'm gonna call this my chart. So we wait for this to finish up creating the virtual environment, and then we will cd to my chart. And then if you're on Linux, you will need to cd to bin folder, and if you're on Windows, you need to cd to the scripts folder. So now here is where we want to activate our virtual environment. If you are on Windows, you need to run activate or activate.bat, or if you are on Linux, you need to run source space /activate. And now, as you can see, our virtual environment has been created. Now, what we're going to do first is to pip install Django. Also, I need to install the Django REST framework, so I'm gonna run pip3 install Django REST framework, because we're gonna use this REST framework for our project in order to return a response related to our data, which we derive from the database, and then pass it to our JavaScript code. So right now we've also installed Django REST framework, and the next thing we need to do is to run Django admin. So Django admin, start project, and then we can call this chart. So we can now cd to chart. And now what we're gonna do is to create an app folder, right? So what we need to do is to run python manage.py start app, and we're gonna call this chart app. And we do create this, the reason we create this app folder is to create our models and then be able to add data to our database. And once we do that, we'll be able to have we'll be able to graph our data based on our database. So let's create the chart app, and so here we're ready to run code space dot in order to open up a new window inside our VS Code. And now, as you can see, we have the two folders, chart and chart app. So right over here we have settings.py. The first thing we do instead of every project is to add the name of the app to the settings.py installed apps. So here I'm going to add the chart app name to the installed apps. And also let's open up a new terminal and migrate our project. So Python manage.py migrate There we go. And then we can run the server, python manage.py run server. There we go. So the server is up and running successfully. We can just open it up and a rocket appears. So we've done this a lot of times. I'm not going to repeat that. So let's press Ctrl C and clear the terminal. Also, the next thing you need to do is to add the REST framework that we've already installed. REST framework. And by the way, there is this underline between them. So here we are. So now let's get started with our project by creating the models.py. So we need to head over to our chat app and switch to models.py. And here we're gonna create a new class called, we can call this data. And here we can use models.model. And then here I can write. So now imagine that here instead of the, imagine that in our example, there is this patient who wants to let his or her doctor know about the status of his or her blood pressure, and every day he or she will update the records of his or her blood pressure. So that it will then be graphed into onto a chart. So what we need to do is to first of all add the date. So for that we use models.date time field. So this is our X of the chart, right? So this is the horizontal part of our chart. So we can write auto now add for when we want to create the database, and we can set this to true. Also for our blood pressure. So notice that each day the user is only needs to only enter the date once. So if there are twice, the data is not valid. So the other one is the blood pressure, right? So blood pressure rate that the user will enter inside of the database. So we use models.char character field. So we use max length equals to, so we don't need a lot of, we don't have a lot of digits, so probably 10 is enough. We don't need a lot of numbers or characters. Even 10 is a lot. And then we're gonna add the def str function in order to add this to our admin panel. And we use the self, and then we're gonna return self.date. There we go. So we do this in order to add this to our admin panel so that we can control this. And then inside of our admin.py, we're gonna add this. So first of all, we need to import it. So from .models import. So the class that we had instead of the models.py was data. Import data. And the next step is to write admin.site.register data. So let's save this, and so let's run our server. Python manage.py run server. And now let's follow the link to localhost. Now let's switch to our admin panel. And so before we do that, we need to create a super user. If we don't create a super user, we will have a problem of logging into our admin panel. So let's stop the server and create a super user. So I'm going to clear this, and so I'm going to run python manage.py create super user, and now I'm going to leave this as blank because we want the user to be with my name, Mohammed, and now we will enter our email. So it could be an arbitrary email. Doesn't really matter if it's a real one or not, at least for this project. So I'm gonna add my password, then add the confirmation. So the super user is successfully created. And by the way, after creating the super user, and before running the server, you need to make sure about one of the things, because something is wrong here. It was date, and by the way, self.date is wrong because it's a number, right? So you need to change this to blood pressure because it's a string. Although this is number 2, but the date here created by this datetime field is just a number, okay? So it's not going to be considered as a string, but this character field will be considered as a string, so you can add it to your str function. So let me add this and save this. And wherever in your projects you are, make sure you run the make migrations if you haven't done this, and also migrate, and then we will be ready to run the server. So in this video we managed to create our models, create our project, and add it to our admin panel. So in the next one we're gonna try this and also write the templates for write the URLs, views, and templates for actually graphing the data to a chart. So that's it for this part of the video.